Hello everyone, it's Matt Brown here from the band Dead Parade in Matt Brown's Guitar Studio, and welcome to my third Q&A session. So I wanted to thank all of you for sending in your awesome questions, and I will answer them now. So our first question comes from Krieg Feet, and it is, what was my first guitar? So my first guitar was a Lotus Strat copy, which is, it's kind of like a Squier Strat, just a Strat knockoff. And it was a really terrible guitar. The neck warped, I want to say, in less than a year's time. And I didn't do anything wrong with it. Usually a neck gets warped by leaving the strings off of it for a really long time, or leaving it in a really intense climate. But didn't do either of those things, and yeah, it was a real POS. All right, our next question comes from Alessandro Vitale. Sorry if I mispronounced that. And it's, do you know the Pixies? If yes, what do you think of them? The Pixies is a band that I have just a profound amount of respect for, just because of their influence that they had, the time they were doing the music that they made. I don't think there would have been, bands like Nirvana. Well, there would have been, but they just wouldn't have had as much success had the Pixies not already kind of broken down that door. So a band that I really respect. Their songs, like I answered in the comments section, are really hit or miss with me. So like, Here Comes Your Man, a song like that, I'm just really not into. But some of their other songs just really I connect with. So one of those bands that just love or hate their songs, but I really respect them regardless. Okay, next question is from James McDonald. James says, "Hey Matt, I have two questions for you. The first one is possibly could you do a Here She Comes Now lesson? And the second one is I'm having trouble with amp placement when I play live. Any suggestions?" Okay, so first one, can I do a lesson on Here She Comes Now? Maybe that's one I haven't transcribed, so if a private student or somebody contracts me to transcribe that one, then I'd be willing to teach the lesson. But I guess until I have a reason to transcribe it, I probably won't. So the next question is, I'm having trouble with amp placement when I play live. So that's something that almost every musician struggles with, and every venue is going to be a little bit different. I personally these days use in-ear monitors, and I find that as long as my mix is dialed into my in-ear monitors perfectly, it really doesn't matter where my amp is placed. Like I've had to do some really funny things where I've put the amp on the side of the stage and having it face across the stage instead of out towards the audience. Just because of lack of space on the stage, playing on a small stage with, the headlining band backlining their gear and stuff. So that, if you can afford a good set of in-ear monitors, that would be my first kind of solution. Although, if you're working with a sound guy at a bar that, doesn't really know what he's doing, all of this, you're going to have a hard time regardless. So try to play at venues where the sound guy doesn't suck. Is another piece of advice. The other thing, if you don't have in-ear monitors, probably what you want to do is kind of angle your amp inwards. So let's say the drum set is sitting right next to me here. Maybe angling your amp a little bit towards the center of the stage and not just straight out really helps. If you're monitoring directly from your amp, and so your other musicians, your bass player and your drummer can hear your amp as well. That helps a lot. What it kind of hinders, though, is if you're standing right in front of your amp and you're singing, you might have a harder time hearing the direct sound from your amp. But really, if the monitoring, you have wedges and they're set up correctly, you have an in-ear monitor and the mix is set up good, none of this should matter. So really, half of this is on the sound guy. Hope that helps. Next question is from Johnny Lang. Johnny says, I see that you own a Mesa Boogie Mark V amp, and I was wondering what amp has the closest sound to Mesa Boogie amp for a cheaper price. So the Mesa Boogie Mark V that I own is the low watt version, and it has EL84s. So I don't know. probably, your best bet is to find any affordable tube amp, I would say. And the amps that I usually recommend in that price range are like the Vox AC15 or some of the lower expensive Marshall tube amps. Blackstar makes a pretty nice low price tube amp combo. I can never remember how it's pronounced. It's either Bugera or Bugera. They make some pretty nice affordable tube amps too. So that's probably what I would look into are those brands. The orange, Tiny Terror, like those little tiny amps sound good, but then you'd have to buy an additional speaker, so that might put the price tag higher than you want to go. So those would be my recommendations. Okay, this one I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it. It looks like Dejin27, and the comment/question is, I've recently started playing. I wondered, when will I get to the point that I can play songs, and what Nirvana songs would be the easiest to start off with? So, your progress, everybody's going to be different, and the source that you learn from is going to play a huge factor into that. So if you're learning from good sources, you're going to learn faster. Practice time too. I always stress quality over quantity. So learning how to practice efficiently and how to maximize your time is another thing. But some of the Nirvana songs are very easy. Something in the Way would be probably a good one to start with. Molly's Lips, just 2 chords for the whole song, so pretty easy. 2 power chords back and forth. Turnaround was an easy one. Tourette's would be a real easy one to do as well. I'm trying to think of some other ones. Yeah, so that's a good list that'll get you started. If some of you others would help me out with this and post some of the easy songs that you think would be good for a beginner too, I'd really appreciate it. So thanks for that in advance. Okay, next question is from Damnation. Do you think it's better to learn sheet music or tab? If you put a gun to my head and force me to answer which one is better, definitely sheet music. So what I notice is that with private students and just musicians in general that can read music, across the board, they're almost all better and have a better understanding of music as a whole, and music theory and composition and all of that. And usually people that aren't readers don't usually have that knowledge. Also, I think learning how to play with a good sense of musicality, I notice, doesn't usually happen with people that are just tab readers, because they don't really understand why they're playing what they're playing and why they're playing things a certain way as far as articulation, dynamics, highlighting certain notes with, to effectively highlight resolutions, all these things. So definitely sheet music, but, as a guitarist, you definitely need to be able to read both, in my opinion. You're just going to be better off if you learn both. Okay, so Jacob Wilson, do you like Black Sabbath or heavy metal in general? If so, what are some of your favorite bands? So yeah, I'm a big metal fan. I used, early on in my career, I was actually kind of almost exclusively like a metal guitarist. So this is, when I was a teenager, prior to going to college and whatnot. So yeah, big metal fan. I love Black Sabbath. They started it all, and have still to this day one of the best sounds. I love the old Metallica stuff, Pantera, all the Pantera records. Sepultura has always been one of my favorite metal bands. These days, not these days, but I've always really liked Meshuggah. If you consider Deftones a metal band, I really like them. They're kind of, System of a Down, is that a metal band? Tool, are they a metal band? So I like those guys a lot. I don't really listen to a lot of extreme stuff with all hard vocals, so I'd say Sepultura and Meshuggah are really probably the only bands that do all hard vocals that I listen to. I kind of need a vocal melody, so but yeah, big metal fan. Okay, next question's from Waiti. Okay, it says, how do you feel about genres when it comes to certain mediums? Do you feel they kind of hinder the type of sound or style a band may be going for? If I understand your question correctly, I think, I guess what this comes down to is, how diverse maybe should a band be? Is kind of my thought. I thought maybe the Beatles were maybe a little too diverse at certain points in their career. It sounded like, you know, one song to the next was like a completely different band. So I think that was a sort of a failure on their part, and maybe somebody else that you ask would say that's one of their strengths. So, you know, people mention the Red Hot Chili Peppers a lot too in this kind of discussion. When early '90s they started to blend in more of a hip hop influence and everything. So I thought in their case that really, really worked. You know, like old songs like the Power of Equality, you know, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, you know, a lot of stuff from that particular album I thought worked really well. So if something sounds good and it's interesting and people respond to it, it is good. You know, I guess it doesn't matter how many styles it blends or whatever, you know. People are responding to, you know, an emotional response with music, and as long as that's there, people I think are going to dig it no matter how weird it is. Okay, next question. Also, how do you feel about the collegiate way of trying to earn success in a primarily entertainment-based industry, like music or movies, for instance? Okay, that's a really good question. So, if you go to music school and you get a degree from a good 4-year or 2-year, or even get a master's degree or doctorate, whatever, it's not a guarantee that you're going to have success or a job. It's not like, you know, going to school for computer programming, whereas, you know, if you get good grades and you have a good resume and you have a degree in programming, you will find a job. It's not like that at all. It's completely based on your skills, number one, how you market yourself, and, you know, who you know and the connections you make. So the collegiate experience for me, I went to college. I have a 4-year degree, a bachelor's in classical guitar performance. And what I gained from that is just all the information on how to be a good musician, how to be a good teacher, how to be a good engineer. I think I was successfully taught that information, so I'm successful in that department. You know, I like to think so anyway. Like, I play well and all of that stuff. I get gigs. So the other thing is building the connections that'll help you. You know, if you have professors with good connections that'll help you along in the industry, that'll help a lot too. If not, though, if you get a crappy education and those professors don't have connections, you're probably maybe better off saving your money and maybe getting a degree in something else, or not going to college at all these days, sadly, especially in the U.S. The job market is just so competitive, and you might rack up tons and tons of hundreds of thousands of dollars in college debt. So, you know, that's a very tough decision, and I wish it was just a real obvious answer these days, but unfortunately I don't think it is. Okay, Marissa Chavez, what can you do when playing guitar? Because I feel like I'm stuck and I'm missing something. So I would say, you know, the resources that you learn from are very important with guitar. You know, I think my channel is pretty good, but I only teach songs, so you're not getting a lot of the other materials that you might need, the music theory, the, you know, guitar technique, those kinds of things. So some teachers that I've seen on YouTube that are good, I like the, I forget his name, I'm terrible. He does the Guitar Lessons 365 channel and does some general technique and theory lessons. So I forget his name. Carl, I believe his name is. He does some really great work, so maybe check out his lessons. I've heard a lot of good things about the Justin Guitar page for general guitar knowledge and theory, so maybe check that out too. The Berklee College of Music puts out some really good resources for guitar learning, like their Modern Method for Guitar book series, Melodic Rhythms for Guitar, stuff like that. A lot of the William G. Levitt books, Levitt, whatever. So if you're stuck in a rut too, the other thing is, or the main thing that happens is you're in a routine and your routine is no longer yielding results. So that's the other thing I want to talk about with this. So if you're in a routine, change your routine. You know, if you're playing X technical exercise to improve your speed or whatever, start playing a different exercise that works on the same thing. Also, start listening to music that you wouldn't normally listen to, or start playing styles of music that you wouldn't normally listen to. Like if you're a rock and metal person, you've never played jazz, do it. Or play blues. Or if you're a blues and jazz person, start playing some metal. or something that's classical guitar, something out of your normal realm, and usually that helps to sort of at least loosen your way out of the rut. So yeah, this is something I'm going to continue to talk about more in the future, but hopefully that response gives you some help. Okay, next question is from Chandler McNabb. It says, Matt, do you plan on posting any more free videos of Alice in Chains songs on YouTube? Their self-entitled album has some killer songs that really emphasize Jerry Cantrell's playing. Keep up the good work. Well, thanks a lot, Chandler. Great questions. Jerry Cantrell is one of my favorites. And the self-titled album, probably my favorite Alice in Chains one. So I like I said in the comments, I'm going to do Grind and Shame and You for sure from that album. I don't necessarily have anything else planned, but I would like to do a lot more songs from that in the future. If you guys haven't seen it, I've already done Again and Heaven Beside You from that record, so maybe check those out if you haven't already. But I'm hoping to get to those towards probably the fall, I'm guessing, is when you should see those songs. Okay, Poopy John asks, what do I think of modern music? That's also a tricky one to answer. And I think usually what people are asking is two components, like, are there great bands doing great things today, is number one. And then the other thing is, like, what do I think of mainstream, like, the stuff that's jammed down everyone's throats by record labels these days. So I'll answer the first one first. These days, I don't think there are a lot of good rock bands out there. And it's not that I haven't looked. I spent a lot of time searching pretty extensively, and what I'm noticing happening is that rock is just not popular and is getting much love from the labels and in the money department in general. So a lot of rock bands that start off in good, unfortunately, just aren't lasting as long as they used to. So that's a big problem. So if you guys can support any local band that you think is awesome, or any band that's up and coming, that in and of itself will help to change the mainstream and what labels are actually signing these days. So I think there are a lot of great like hip hop acts and kind of poppier rock type things. A lot of good electronic music that's coming out these days. Like I really love Fantagram. I think that's an awesome band. But yeah, as far as rock and metal goes, we're kind of in a slow point, I think. That's not to say that there aren't lots of great bands out there that are doing things. Like, I just heard the new Failure song yesterday, and I think it's absolutely amazing. Loved it. The music video is awesome, too. So, everything's cyclical, I guess. Okay, Peter Frankel is asking, were you ever in a band or multiple bands? If so, did you guys do original stuff, and did you guys gig? Lastly, what's your advice for up-and-coming bands? Okay, so yeah, I've been in tons of bands over the years. My current band is Dead Parade, and it's really the only one that I'm proud of, sadly. And I think that's because I have a decent amount of control over it, so I'm not like fighting other people for creative input. And I'm working with two other people that I'm, for the most part, totally on the same page with. So it's going well, and we've got a new album coming out roughly around beginning of 2019 or Christmas of 2018. Yeah, we gig. We kind of play regionally around the Midwest. We're not like a national or international touring band or anything like that. So what's my advice for up-and-coming bands? My biggest piece of advice is to, a lot of people tend to lean on Facebook, and Facebook seems like it's on its way out. So don't, I guess, depend on Facebook for all your advertising, all of that stuff. And advertising is what most bands neglect. It's just as important as working on your craft and creating new songs and all of that, playing live. So you focus, I would say 50% of your time that you spend on your band in that department, making YouTube videos, designing merch, stickers, stuff that's going to get your name out. A good music site that I recommend it's called Number One Music, or N1 Music, and that's a good way for independent artists to kind of share their music with people and get reviewed by other kind of independent artists. So that's been really a good website for me to use. So my advice is to work as hard as you can, play as often as possible, and learn as much as you can. And all of those experiences will help you down the road if they don't give you immediate success. So, next question's from RJ Bizzle, 1984. Hey Matt, I was wondering your opinion of punk rock music in general, and if you have any favorite punk bands. I guess with any genre, it's like I don't just like punk music, or I don't just like jazz. You know, there's certain bands or artists that I like within every genre. You know, and punk's no different. So I like a lot of the early stuff. You know, the Clash, MC5, a lot of the straight edge stuff. Actually, in the '80s was really cool. And for I guess more modern type stuff, you know, I do like the old Green Day stuff, Rancid, Bad Religion. You know, those are pretty famous bands, but yeah, I like a lot of that stuff. Old Sex Pistols. If you consider Joy Division a punk band, I really like them. So yeah. Okay, so it seems like a lot of serious music people shy away from punk rock because of its simplicity. But I find that energy, enthusiasm, and authenticity to be so inspiring. I agree, yeah. And Flea said this. He said, whenever I notice a musician of any style is lacking something, it's because they've never played punk. And I just think that's such a profound statement. I think it's totally true, too. Like, usually, like, the jazz guys that are lacking in emotion or just raw appeal, and they're guys that have never listened to punk or played it. And I found that to be true. And there are a lot of punk musicians that have insane chops. Like, I forget his name. Again, bad with names. The bass player from Rancid is, he's insane. He's just a great musician. There's a lot of great punk drummers and guitarists too, like Noodles from Offspring. That guy's got just an insane right hand, you know, just razor rock solid. So I like punk. Okay, Professor Chaos. Awesome, I love South Park. Even though you don't like the Foo Fighters, is there a song that you kind of like by them? Great videos, by the way. Well, thanks a lot. So yeah, I do like some of the Foo Fighters songs. I liked, probably my favorite is Stacked Actors. Just like the aggression of that one. Everlong, of course, you know, it's a great song, I think, just really well written, good one. There are probably a few others that I've heard that I like, but those are the two that are kind of coming to mind that I thought were really good songs. Our next question is from Good Music. And Good Music asks, what are my top 10 favorite songs? So I didn't rank these in order, but I had a lot of fun coming up with this list. So, my list is, in no particular order, 3 Days by Jane's Addiction. The reason being, Dave DeVaro is my favorite guitarist, and my favorite song really showcases what he does as a player, so really love that one. Enema by Tool, from the same album. Just fantastic song. It just takes you on this crazy, emotional, long roller coaster. Lots of mellow points, just lots of dynamic changes. Just love that song. I had to pick just one Tool song, so I went with that one. With Soundgarden, I went with Jesus Christ Pose as my favorite song from them. It's just so noisy, so heavy. I remember seeing the video as a little kid and just thinking it was the just coolest, darkest thing ever, and it still is. It's totally awesome. If you've never seen that video, if you're kind of younger, maybe check that one out. Alright, the next song that I included is Paranoid Android by Radiohead. Another kind of life-changing, just epic masterpiece, I thought. So next song I have is Happiness and Slavery by 9 Inch Nails. One of my favorite bands, and just wanted to pick one by them, and I think that's the song that really hit me the most. I really love their Woodstock 94 live performance of it too. Next one I have is Through the Eyes of Ruby by the Smashing Pumpkins. This is a second disc of Melancholy. Another pretty lengthy song that I think really influenced me as a songwriter and taught me some things about what you can do with, I guess, sort of non-traditional song structures. The next one I have is Grind by Alice in Chains. I think the song that best showcases Jerry Cantrell as a guitarist and songwriter. Some of the stuff that Lane Staley did with the vocal fries and everything, that just sounds so evil and cool too. Next one I have is Trip Like I Do by the Crystal Method. This is just an electronic music masterpiece. I'm going to tell a funny story too. The bass player for Dead Parade, Nick Guthrie, and I went to see Crystal Method. This was, maybe 2004. And Nick is a big, tall, white guy that, you wouldn't expect to be a dancer at all. And I was standing behind him at this concert, and I was just like, is Nick dancing? And sure enough, he was. Like, the groove was just so strong at that concert that he was dancing. I couldn't believe it. So, Crystal Method, my hat is off to you. You are amazing musicians, and I love what you do. Okay, my next one is Murder Was the Case by Snoop Dogg. So the old Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg records really had a huge influence on me, especially just the instrumental portions of the songs that Dr. Dre comes up with. And it's just so dark and so evil. It was just like, I don't know, like hip-hop horror music or something like that. It's just really cool, like synthesizer and guitar parts on those records that I think I've learned a ton from in the songwriting department. So the last song on my top 10 is Where Is the Line by Bjork. This is the album where I believe everything is recorded with voice. So all of the drums you hear is just beatboxing. Everything is voice. There's I think maybe some like synth or keyboard pad stuff on that album, but it's an amazing song. And that lady is so creative. She's just on a whole nother level. So there are my answers, my top 10 favorite songs. Okay, what's the best acoustic guitar for under $300? Honestly, these days I have no idea, and this is a question from the Hat Master. So, probably what I would guess is, some of the Epiphone guitars are still really good. Dean, Yamaha have always made good entry-level guitars. I have no idea what an entry-level Fender acoustic sounds like these days. Maybe check out the Ibanez guitars. Maybe some of the lesser priced Taylors as well. Yeah, that should give you a good place to start. So I would recommend checking out Epiphone, Yamaha, and Dean as my top 3 recommendations. Okay, the Game Master is asking, what are your favorite guitar brands? So I think the highest quality electric guitar that you can buy, that's like, a big production company is a Paul Reed Smith. Personally, I like the McCarty models for a little more warm sound. And then I use the Custom 24 that you've seen in, most of the videos. Those are my 2 favorite guitars. I like G&L for Strats and Telecaster type guitars. Gibson as a company I absolutely hate. It just don't seem like they have it together at all. Like I just kind of imagine like a warehouse full of like screaming monkeys like running that company. I'm probably going to get a whole lot of shit for that, but I don't care. So they make great guitars though. They're overpriced and a nightmare to work with though. Who else? Acoustics, I like Martins, Taylors, Guilds. That's usually what I tend to gravitate towards. I guess also with electric guitars, I like Gretsch guitars. Reverend makes a nice guitar. There's a ton of great guitars out there. Those are some of my favorites though. Okay, Substatus. How do you feel about Green Day? I would love some Insomniac stuff to be taught well. Yeah, I like the first 3 Green Day albums the best. What is it? Slappy Hours, Kerplunk, Dookie. I did like some of the stuff on Insomniac. I'll maybe teach that stuff in the future. Probably won't happen this year though, because I already have basically the entire rest of the year planned out. So maybe next year. Okay, Kid Grunge. Do you like Led Zeppelin? Yes, love Led Zeppelin. If so, what are some of my favorite songs? Let's see. I like kind of their longer songs the best. So maybe stuff like Achilles' Last Stand. What's the one that Tool covered? No Quarter. Love that song. Kashmir. I like some of the bluesy ones stuff like Since I've Been Loving You, and some of the real aggressive ones too. Rock and Roll, I like that song. A Whole Lot of Love. I like it all, really. So that concludes the questions and all of the answers that I have for them for today's Q&A. So thank you all so much for watching and sending in your questions. And I should have another one of these up in hopefully about 6 weeks. So in the meantime, if you have questions, send them on in. I keep running log of all this stuff. And I hope to see you guys around in my next lesson. All right, thanks a lot. Please subscribe.